Good for the league if Carson Wentz came back stronger and better than ever, and Philly fans are certainly hoping that's the case, but you can't understate what he's missing or what you're missing now without him. He enters his second season looking to play better situational football, and boy, has he done that. Leading the NFL in touchdown passes in the red zone, on third down, and when blitzed. And Wentz has a sneaky ability to scramble, but boy, he's been hit a lot. Since the start of last season, Carson has been hit while running or throwing 171 times. Only Cam Newton, Tyrod Taylor, and Russell Wilson have been hit more, and obviously there are a lot of more designated runs for those quarterbacks. Thought we'd take a deeper dive on this inside the red zone here on NFL Live, and a very similar situation, RG3, to what you had in 2012, where you first injured your knee against the Ravens on the Haloti Ngata hit.
Correct.
And then you came back to play, and then it was re-injured in the playoff game to Seattle.
Yep.
How do you deal with that sort of situation? What did you know about your knee at that time, and what were the risks when you decided to get back on the field and play?
I think as a player, Carson got hurt a couple plays before he actually ended up leaving.
Yeah, on the dive into the end zone, yeah.
So I think as a player, when you initially get hurt, you want to play. Your first thought isn't, okay, let me find out how bad this is. Your first thought is, I need to get back out there to help my team win. So against Baltimore, when Haloti Ngata, that big old truck, hit my knee,
yes,
my first thought was, that really hurt. But
yeah,
I wanted to get back out there. I ended up going back out in the game, exited a couple plays later. But moving forward from there, I had this campaign with Adidas, this all-in for week one campaign. And I think it was misunderstood. But what Carson is saying, he's going to come back stronger and he'll be better than ever. I think that was the same mentality that I had. You want to come back from that injury. You're going to put in all the work you possibly can as a player and allow the doctors, the coaches, and the organization to make the decision from there. And I think that's what he's looking at. And it will be a tough process to get back, but I believe he'll get there. And he's got the right insight in his life. He knows why he's playing. He knows his purpose for playing, and he knows God's behind him. So I think he'll be okay.
Because I think everybody was really concerned about you in that game because they could tell you weren't the same player.
Right.
And it felt like almost every time, especially on that slippery turf at FedEx Field, it was like, oh, and then that one play when you were dropping back and it just gave. Did you think at some point the knee was going to go in that game?
That slippery turf it's grass, but it's a big subject in D.C.
Yes, it is.
But
it seems to be every year.
They still haven't changed it. I don't think they're ever going to change it. I had no concern that I was going to slip up or hurt my knee in that game against Seattle. I really just thought I can make it through this game. I watched Phillip Rivers do this type of things. I've watched other quarterbacks go out there and be carried from one play to the next, and you have that mentality as a player, and it's. I think that's what makes you great. And it's everybody else's job around you to make sure, hey, is this guy doing something that's going to be detrimental to his future? But as a player, you don't really think about that. Look at J.T. Barrett, goes, has surgery, plays in a game 4 or 5 days later, because that's your mentality as a player. I want to play.
And get out there on the field. We'll get back to what the future lies for Carson in just a minute, but let's bring in Adam Schefter here. Adam, this was an injury that happened in December, a torn ACL. Obviously, that leads a lot of people to think it's probably going to spill into the 2018 season. What are you hearing about a timetable for Carson Wentz?
Listen, as Chris Mortensen laid out last night, sometimes people get the wrong idea about how quickly they can come back from these types of injuries because of Adrian Peterson. He was so superhuman that he skewed the timeline that some players have to getting back onto the playing field. And when Mort spoke to Dr. James Andrews last night, Dr. James Andrews said these types of injuries, without knowing Carson Wentz's specific one, generally sideline players 9 to 12 months. And that means that obviously the start of next season are in question for Carson Wentz. Now, he's a big, strong, tough player, and I'm sure he'll be resilient and come back as quickly as he can. But it doesn't change the fact that all eyes will be on him, much the same way that they were on RG3 when he was attempting his comeback during the offseason, to see whether Carson Wentz can make it back for opening day 2018.
All right, Adam, thanks very much. By the way, I failed to mention that Josina Anderson had joined us here on NFL Live in the Red Zone. I apologize.
What's up, everybody?
I was in mode, and I was just going.
So you got a special guest.
We're delighted that you're here with us as well.
Thank you.
So, Louis, let's start with you from a front office perspective.
Yeah.
Obviously, you want Carson Wentz back as soon as you can, but you want to make sure that we don't aggravate something that might not be ready. And let's be clear, Adrian Peterson ruined ACL returns for everybody in December, and he came back in September, and he came within 9 yards of setting the single-season rushing mark.
Yep.
So how do you gauge expectations versus anticipation versus reality?
Well, it's always the balance between short-term and long-term, and it's easier for front office people to do this than coaches because the coaches can say they want to do this, especially during the offseason when you're not playing games and you're not really getting W's and L's checked off. But once training camp rolls around and the blood starts flowing, it's all of a sudden then it's always like an update about when is my player going to be on the field? When could he possibly be back on the field? And look, the Eagles are in this for the long haul. I think Jeffrey Lurie has done a great job of letting people know that the long term is really what he's after, long-term success here. And Carson is really, he's the focal point of that. I don't think, without a doubt, they will rush him back in any way, shape, or form. If that means it bleeding into November, December of next year, then so be it. They'll build look, there's 52 other guys that they have to worry about, and they'll have to build the best roster that they can. You cannot risk what may be a generational passer in the NFL, just for a couple extra wins during the regular season where you could ruin him for the rest of his career. You can't do it.
Well, I think the other point that needs to be made here is just the aspect of what the coaching staff can do to protect the athlete from themselves. Because I know you were mentioning in 2013 you felt like you could just get through it, or your first season, but everyone on the broadcast, even the people that were calling the game, kept saying your knee looked like it was weak and it was going to give out. Right. I was talking to someone last night around the Tom Savage situation, and they were talking about his mentality as to, I know it's a whole different thing with the knee versus the head, but it still goes back to the same thing with the person making the point about, in college he had lost his job to an injury and still has that fear in his head. So he still has that warrior mentality when it comes to want to stay in. And the person was making the point is that at some point the video has to also help the people on the sidelines to help you guys from yourself as well. And so that's the aspect of that I think needs to enter this conversation as well.
By the way, that's a great point. The NFL and the NFLPA are launching a joint investigation over the Tom Savage thing as to how that video of him in that fencing response, as they say, was not part of the evaluation. We'll get back to you and what you did in 2013 in a second. But Tim, this is now an interesting time for Nick Foles because based on the timeline, this is not just about these 3 games and whatever the playoffs are. This is about him playing well enough to maybe say, hey, I could be the guy that carries us forward going forward in 2018. As a backup quarterback, how do you sort of frame that, knowing that whenever Carson is there, he's going to be the guy, but I have a real opportunity here?
Yeah, well, I think it's clear that Nick Foles knows that Carson Wentz is everything that they want to build around in Philadelphia. But Nick Foles has also been in a situation before where, he was given an opportunity to prove that he could be a starter, and then it didn't work out. And a lot of times when that happens, Robert can certainly attest to this as well, when you get your opportunity to play, you don't know when you're going to get another one if that one doesn't work out. That's just the reality of the business. And so I think the important thing for Nick Foles will end up being that he's got a great opportunity on a really good football team to prove that he can play at a starter level, but he can't put the pressure on himself as if this is the last opportunity.
Right.